What does it look like to say yes, taking the gamble? Athanasius in the Incarnation points out the example of martyrs, women, men, children, who, he says, seem to defy death, trampling on it, unafraid to bear witness to their faith. Deification and incorruptibility are not, then, words drawn from the vocabulary of magic. They are words drawn from the vocabulary of love, from the vocabulary of faith. Faith that the gamble that love is the highest form of life is worth taking, and that all we have to do is not let go of the hand of the incarnate Word, who unites us as humans in the incorruptible life, which is his own, precisely as given to us. And here's one more quote. This actually now is going back to the first oration against the Arians. Therefore, because he was the image of the Father, and because he was immortal, the Word took the form of a slave, and for us as man in his flesh endured death, that thus, on our behalf, through death, he might offer himself to the Father. Therefore also as man, on account of us and our salvation, he is said to be highly exalted, so that in his death we all have died in Christ, so that in Christ himself again we may be highly exalted, being raised from the dead and rising into heaven, where Jesus the forerunner entered on our behalf into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. So friends, I have a little analogy maybe to close for this idea of the creation of a new solidarity, one that we can't give ourselves, but which nevertheless elevates us and, as it were, deifies us. So this analogy is taken from the CD of Homespun Analogies. Not really. But here it is. Let's imagine a gang. A gang is defined in a way, right, it's an association defined by lawlessness, by breaking the law. And the way you advance in gangs is you break the law more, or you break the law in more dramatic ways. So a gang's kind of a dangerous thing to join. Let's say that somebody shows up to join the gang, and unbeknownst to the gang, this person has actually never broken the law and never intends to break the law either, intends to never break the law. They don't know that. They take him in, and they get to know him. He begins talking to them. How about this in the analogy? He convinces the gang that maybe they should do something different, run a charity event, for example, an event for homeless children or something to benefit them. And as he's talking about this, let's say some of the people in the gang start thinking, yeah, that's actually a great idea, because in a way it's going to, kind of clean up our image a little bit, uplift us as almost like we're a civic organization. And so they go along with it. They agree to have an event, a charity event. It turns out as they're organizing it, they find out this guy has lots of connections, as it were. In South Bend terms, he's able to get Kovaleski Stadium, but let's transfer it to Chicago. How's that? He's able to get Soldier Field for this event. And the guys in the gang are thinking, how did he manage that? He must have really high connections, that he can get something like Soldier Field. And also he managed to get lots of stuff. The food donated, the raffle items donated, all kinds of gimmicks that you like to have at these events donated. And the guys in the gang are saying, where'd this guy get all this? I mean, he must have really fantastic connections. So the event's a success, but as time goes on, everybody in the gang sort of finally figures out this guy is never going to break the law. He's never going to use all those connections to break the law. And they are disillusioned. They go on with their life of lawlessness. Eventually, let's say in our analogy, simplified as it were, the police find them. They're all together. This one guy who organized this whole event is kind of known in some ways as a very prominent figure in the gang. When the police show up, how about this? What happens is they're all there, but they all take a step back, except that guy. That guy's arrested and executed. Why? Everyone in that gang knows he never committed a crime. Why didn't he use his connections at the last minute, say, wait, I know all the police. They'll come. They'll get me out of this. I actually never did anything wrong. But he doesn't do it. He doesn't use any of those connections. And they start realizing, maybe in thinking about this, that he really did become a member of their gang. And he didn't back away from what that meant, even at the last second. Although he has evidently all the power to have backed away. Don't you think that if you were a gang member where this guy kind of took the hit for you, you'd be thinking, why? Why? And it would dawn on you that the explanation has to be somehow that he loved us, that he actually entered into this association on different terms than we thought he did. And us having our lives now and him not having his, it kind of, well, we have a new relationship to this person, don't we? We have a relationship in memory to that person's love. And that recreates the whole way that we say we among ourselves. Anyone bearing the memory of this person now has a whole new way of saying we, which they didn't give themselves. He gave it to them by truly joining the gang, but not on the terms of their association, law-breaking, but out of a love which they didn't deserve. He just gave it to them. Now, I don't have a way in this analogy of paralleling the resurrection. There are limits to all analogies, limits to the analogy of the shamrock, as we saw in an earlier lecture, and limits to this analogy. But I hope it kind of shows, by analogy anyway, how someone could empty himself to a point of solidarity, and truly having entered that solidarity, accept the penalty for the solidarity, in this case of lawlessness, that he didn't deserve. And how that moment affects or creates a new way of saying we, a new solidarity, which we couldn't have given ourselves and which we have in him. That's the analogy for the renewed humanity, or for deification, as Athanasius puts it. Thanks.